Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by the channel today. We've got another difficult case to dive into. Let's rewind to the summer of 2023. Savannah, Georgia was hot and humid, and while the city's charm with its historic streets and oak trees was still there, life felt a bit different for two sisters living in a small apartment on the edge of town. Lucy and Tasha Johnson shared a modest two-bedroom place. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Lucy at 23 was used to working long hours just to keep things going. She held down two jobs, waitressing during the day and cleaning offices at night. The routine was tiring, but she made sure the bills were paid and there was food on the table. Tasha, who had just turned 22, had a different outlook. She was outgoing, loved going finer things, and had big dreams that didn't match their current reality. She worked part-time at a boutique, but somehow managed to live a lifestyle that didn't fit the paycheck. At first, it was just small things. A new purse here, some expensive shoes there, but soon it became hard to ignore. Designer clothes and jewelry started piling up in Tasha's room, and she was out at fancy spots almost every night. Lucy noticed, but couldn't figure out how Tasha was affording it. As time went on, Lucy's suspicion grew. She started asking questions, and their relationship, once close, started to strain. Tasha would dodge Lucy's questions, acting like she was overreacting. But Lucy couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She felt helpless, watching her sister get caught up in a lifestyle that seemed out of place. It all came to a head in early August. One night, Lucy came home early from her second job, tired from a long shift. As she walked past Tasha's room, she overheard her talking on the phone. Tasha's voice was soft and flirty, and Lucy caught a name, Victor. That was when everything clicked. Victor was older, much older, Lucy learned. From what Tasha said on the phone, he was about 45 and a wealthy businessman who had been funding her expensive lifestyle. Lucy was shocked. Her sister was involved with a sugar daddy. She was angry and scared. She had heard about situations like this where younger women get involved with older men for money and it rarely ends well. Lucy feared for her sister the risks, the power imbalance, and the danger of becoming dependent on someone like that. Lucy couldn't wrap her head around how Tasha could be so careless. It wasn't just about the expensive things. It was the risk, the danger. Tasha's decisions felt like a betrayal, like everything Lucy had worked hard for was at stake. But most of all, Lucy was scared for her sister. Tasha, on the other hand, saw things completely differently. To her, Victor was a way out. She saw him as an escape from their difficult life. A ticket to a better future without all the financial stress they had grown up with. The gifts, the money, the fancy lifestyle, Tasha saw it as a fair trade. She ignored Lucy's concerns, brushing them off as jealousy or pointless worrying. Tasha believed she had everything under control, but Lucy knew better. She could see the cracks in Tasha's thinking. Her sister was chasing a dream that was clouding her judgment. Their arguments became intense. The more Lucy tried to reason with Tasha, the more stubborn Tasha became. She refused to see the danger. What once were small disagreements between them now turned into deeper conflicts fueled by Tasha's secret life. The bond they had, built over years of struggling together, was unraveling. Lucy felt helpless, like she was losing her sister. She wanted to protect Tasha, to pull her back from the brink, but there was nothing she could do. Tasha had made her choice, and Lucy couldn't stop her. The atmosphere at home grew unbearable. What used to be a place of comfort for both sisters now felt like a battlefield, thick with tension. Lucy knew something bad was coming. She could feel it in her gut. Tasha's connection with Victor and the lies she was living were leading to something darker than either of them could have predicted. Lucy's fear for her sister grew by the day. Tasha was becoming more secretive, more distant, shutting out her sister's warnings. Lucy watched, powerless, as the carefree Tasha she knew slipped away. She was getting deeper into the world Victor had opened up for her. Their arguments grew worse, and sometimes Tasha didn't even come home, leaving Lucy awake all night, worrying about what could happen next. It wasn't just about luxury anymore. Tasha was playing a dangerous game she didn't fully understand. Victor's presence hung over them. Even though Lucy had never met him, his influence on Tasha was becoming stronger every week. What started as a simple exchange money for companionship had turned into something far more controlling. Lucy noticed little changes in her sister that sent up red flags. Tasha, once so confident, had become anxious. She was always checking her phone, her mood swinging wildly between happiness and nervousness. Lucy tried talking to her, but Tasha shut her down, refusing to admit how much control Victor was gaining. The scariest part was that it wasn't just about money anymore. Victor was deciding how Tasha lived. It started small. Tasha's clothes were different, more revealing, more like what Victor seemed to want. Then Tasha started cutting herself off from her fur friends. Slowly, she was becoming isolated, her world shrinking to just Victor. He even started driving the wedge between the sisters, not wanting Tasha to talk to Lucy. And Tasha, desperate to keep the life Victor gave her, went along with it. Victor's control over Tasha had grown, wrapping tighter around her life with every passing day. Lucy was scared that Victor wasn't just controlling her sister, but that he might be harming her in ways she couldn't yet prove. Her warnings, though, went unheard. Tasha either couldn't see the danger or didn't want to admit it. The expensive gifts, the promises of security, and the carefree lifestyle were too tempting for Tasha to leave behind. Even as Victor's charm began to wear thin, Tasha convinced herself she was still in control. But Lucy knew better. She could see that her sister was heading down a dark path that was getting harder to escape. Every now and then, in moments of rare honesty, Tasha opened up to a close friend. She admitted that Victor's behavior was becoming more possessive. He wasn't the generous man she first thought he was. He wanted to know where she was every minute, controlled her plans, and wouldn't let her see anyone outside of the small circle he approved of. Yet despite her growing discomfort, Tasha couldn't walk away from the money, the designer clothes, or the luxury trips. She told herself she could manage Victor's need for control, that the perks outweighed the increasing danger. But underneath, Lucy knew her sister was scared. Tasha didn't want to admit it, but Lucy could see it. Victor's grip on her was tightening, and Lucy's worst fears were beginning to come true. This wasn't a real relationship, it was a trap, and Tasha was caught in it, playing a dangerous game with a man who had too much control. Every day, Lucy waited for everything to collapse. As Victor's demands grew more intense, Lucy knew the fallout would be worse than anything they could expect. Victor had grown tired of Lucy's interference. To him, she was an obstacle, a reminder that Tasha had someone outside of his influence. After a tense conversation with Tasha in which her sister mentioned Lucy's concerns, Victor decided to take matters into his own hands. He wanted Lucy gone. He arranged to meet her, catching her off guard one evening after she finished her shift. The location was no accident. A dimly lit, upscale restaurant on the edge of Savannah, place that screamed wealth and control. Lucy, already on edge, sat across from Victor, feeling the cold tension between them. She didn't know what he wanted, but she knew it wouldn't be good. Victor wasted no time. Leaning in, his voice smooth but with a dangerous edge, he made his offer. It was straightforward and bold. A large sum of money in exchange for Lucy's silence and distance. He wanted her out of Tasha's life. Lucy was getting in his way, and he didn't tolerate obstacles. The money wasn't just a bribe. It was a reminder of the power he had over Tasha's life, the life of luxury he had given her. And if Lucy wanted, he could offer the same to her. All she had to do was step aside. Lucy listened in disbelief. Her stomach turned at the arrogance of his offer. It wasn't just that Victor was controlling. He was dangerous, willing to buy her silence to tighten his grip on Tasha even more. The answer was clear to Lucy from the start. No amount of money could make her abandon her sister. Tasha's safety was far more important than anything Victor could offer. Without hesitation, Lucy refused his offer, her disgust barely hidden. But as she left the meeting, a heavy feeling settled in her chest. Victor's proposal confirmed what Lucy had feared all along. This wasn't just about a troubled relationship. It was about control. Victor didn't just want to be with Tasha, he wanted to isolate her completely. By turning him down, Lucy knew she'd made herself a target. But her worry for Tasha outweighed her own fears. When she got home, Lucy couldn't hold back her anger any longer. She confronted Tasha, her emotions spilling out as she revealed Victor's manipulative offer. The conversation quickly went downhill. Tasha, defensive as ever, refused to see the danger. To her, Lucy's warning sounded like jealousy. Tasha accused her of trying to ruin her happiness and of not being able to handle the fact that she had found a better life with Victor. The argument grew heated, both sisters throwing hurtful words at each other, their bond unraveling with every accusation. Tasha's loyalty to Victor clashed violently with Lucy's desperation to protect her. When Tasha slammed the door behind her that night, Lucy felt the weight of the situation. She hadn't just lost her sister's trust, Victor had gained even more control. With Lucy's concerns dismissed, Victor's grip on Tasha only tightened. He had expected Lucy to refuse, and he was ready. As Tasha wavered between her connection to Lucy and her loyalty to Victor, he seized the moment. He tightened his hold, demanding total loyalty, warning Tasha that Lucy was trying to destroy what they had. Victor's manipulation grew more blatant, painting Lucy as the enemy. He framed her concern as a threat to Tasha's future, making it harder for Tasha to see the truth. The situation had shifted, and Lucy knew it. As long as Victor was in Tasha's life, her sister would keep heading down this dangerous road. But now, with Tasha firmly under his influence, Lucy felt powerless, watching from the sidelines as everything spiraled toward disaster. Victor's possessiveness had been building for a while, but things finally boiled over on a night that was supposed to be innocent. Without telling him, Tasha decided to go to a party with some friends, desperate for a break from his suffocating control. It was just supposed to be a fun night out at one of Atlanta's trendy nightclubs. But that one decision triggered a storm she never saw coming. When Victor found out she had gone without telling him, his anger exploded. For him, this wasn't just about a night out, it was a betrayal of his control. He convinced himself that Tasha had cheated on him, fueling his jealousy with imagined scenarios of her with other men. Victor wasn't one to ask questions calmly. His first instinct was to lash out. He flooded her phone with calls and messages, each one more frantic and angry than the last. Back at the club, Tasha tried to ignore the constant buzzing, but the tension inside her grew. She knew she had crossed a line, and now she'd have to deal with the consequences. When Tasha finally answered his call, Victor's voice was sharp, full of accusations. He demanded an explanation, his words dripping with venom. Tasha, feeling the weight of his anger, tried to calm him, saying it was just a party and nothing more. But Victor wasn't looking for excuses. He wanted control, submission, and obedience, things Tasha wasn't prepared to give in that moment. Panicking, Tasha did the only thing she could think of. She called Lucy. Her voice trembled as she admitted the depth of her fear. For the first time, Tasha didn't downplay Victor's behavior or make excuses for him. She told Lucy everything: the party, Victor's reaction, and how terrified she was of what he might do. Lucy, already worried, now felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. She knew things were spiraling out of control, and if Tasha didn't leave soon, the situation could turn deadly. Lucy urged her to leave the party and come home immediately before Victor could escalate things further. But it was already too late. Victor, seething with rage, had tracked down Tasha's location using a mutual friend's social media post. He stormed into the nightclub, his fury barely contained as he searched the crowd for her. When he finally found her surrounded by her friends, his anger exploded. Without any regard for the public setting, Victor began shouting at Tasha, accusing her of humiliating him and cheating. His voice rose above the music, drawing the attention of everyone nearby. The once lively atmosphere of the club turned tense as the crowd sensed the growing danger. Tasha, mortified and scared, tried to calm him down, but Victor wasn't listening. His words grew more venomous, and he stepped closer, his aggression almost turning physical as he loomed over her. It wasn't just anger, it was betrayal, at least in Victor's twisted mind. Tasha had crossed a line he couldn't forgive. By the time Lucy arrived, the scene had escalated beyond anything she had imagined. She fought through the crowd just in time to see Victor shouting threats at her sister, his eyes wild with fury. His threats were chilling, full of malice, promising that neither Tasha nor Lucy would escape the consequences of defying him. Lucy's heart pounded as she reached Tasha's side, trying to pull her away from Victor's grasp. Even as she tried to lead her sister out of the club, Victor's cold, calculated threats echoed in her ears. He told them both in no uncertain terms that they would regret standing against him. At that moment, Lucy's worst fears were realized. Victor wasn't just possessive, he was dangerous. His willingness to publicly humiliate and threaten Tasha showed just how deep his rage ran. And Lucy knew that if they didn't find a way out, things would only get worse. The tension had finally boiled over, and with Victor's threats hanging over them, both sisters were trapped in a dangerous situation where the stakes had never been higher. It all came to a head on a fateful evening. Tasha, after weeks of enduring Victor's possessiveness and threats, finally decided to leave him. She had confided in Lucy that she couldn't endure Victor's control any longer. The lifestyle he had promised her was overshadowed by the danger and manipulation he imposed. It had taken time for Tasha to realize what Lucy had warned her about from the start. Victor's financial support came with a price far too high. But Victor, unwilling to lose his grip on Tasha, had other plans. That night he arrived unannounced at their apartment, his mood already dark and menacing. Lucy and Tasha were preparing for a quiet evening, discussing Tasha's escape from the toxic relationship, when the heavy knocking at the door shattered their peace. Lucy sensed the tension immediately when she opened the door and saw Victor's cold, dangerous expression. Without waiting for an invitation, Victor stepped inside, his presence looming over the small space. His anger was palpable, and the confrontation that followed was immediate. Lucy, unable to hold back her fury after weeks of threats and harassment, confronted him directly, demanding he leave, but Victor was not there for a civil conversation. The argument escalated quickly, with accusations flying in every direction. Victor blamed Lucy for turning Tasha against him, while Lucy attacked him for the manipulation and control he had exerted over her sister. Caught between them, Tasha tried to mediate, but her voice was drowned out by the chaos. It didn't take long for the situation to spiral into violence. Fueled by rage and a desperate need to reassert his control, Victor pushed past Lucy, intent on reaching Tasha. Lucy, refusing to let him intimidate them any longer, fought back, shoving Victor with fierce anger. That's when everything turned dangerously worse. Victor, unhinged by the confrontation, pulled out a gun from his jacket. The moment the weapon was brandished, the atmosphere shifted from tense to life-threatening. Victor, with chilling calmness, aimed the gun at both sisters, threatening them with dire consequences if Tasha did not return to him and obey his demands. His words dripped with venom, a twisted blend of possessive control and threats. Lucy, heart racing, knew they were in grave danger. She couldn't let Victor take Tasha back after everything he had done. In a desperate attempt to disarm him, Lucy lunged at Victor, trying to knock the gun from his hand. What followed was a chaotic struggle, mirroring the raw emotions of the room. Tasha, recognizing the deadly threat Victor posed, rushed to help her sister. The small apartment became a battleground as the three fought for control of the situation. Amidst the frantic chaos, Tasha managed to grab Victor's arm, but it was not enough to prevent the inevitable. Then, with a deafening crack, a gunshot rang through the apartment. Time seemed to freeze as the reality of what had just occurred settled in. Tasha gasped, her body going limp as the bullet struck her. The struggle ended abruptly as she collapsed to the floor, blood spreading across her chest. Lucy, in shock, dropped to her knees beside her sister, her mind struggling to grasp the enormity of the situation. Victor, his eyes wide with panic, stumbled backward as the gravity of his actions sank in. His expression shifted from rage to terror, and without a word, he fled the apartment, leaving behind the horrifying evidence of his violence. The door slammed shut, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Lucy cradled Tasha's lifeless body, her heart breaking as she clutched her sister for the last time. The apartment, once a refuge of shared laughter and comfort, was now a scene of unbearable grief and despair. Victor had achieved his goal in the most tragic and devastating manner possible. As Lucy sat there, her sister's blood staining her hands, the weight of the loss was overwhelming. Tasha's life had been cut short, and Lucy was left to confront the unimaginable aftermath of the confrontation. The struggle for control and freedom had ended with the most brutal of consequences. Lucy's pain was compounded by a relentless sense of failure. She had been unable to protect Tasha from Victor's manipulative and violent control, and now she had to live with the haunting memory of that night. As the police arrived, their flashing lights illuminated the darkened street, casting an eerie glow on the scene of the tragedy. The once peaceful neighborhood was now a flurry of activity, with officers collecting evidence and securing the area. Lucy, still in shock and consumed by grief, could barely process what was happening around her. The feeling of failure was crushing, leaving her unable to escape the weight of her loss. The investigation into Tasha's death began that night, with Victor's actions coming under intense scrutiny. It became clear that while he had pulled the trigger, his control and manipulation had led Tasha to this tragic end. As the investigators pieced together the details, Lucy's sorrow began to transform into a fierce resolve. Victor had fled, but Lucy knew she couldn't rest until he was brought to justice. The media quickly seized on the story, turning it from a local tragedy into a nationwide spectacle. Headlines depicted Victor as a wealthy, powerful businessman entangled in a deadly love triangle, manipulating two sisters and causing one to lose her life in a horrific act of violence. The public was captivated by the sensational details of the case: money, power, greed, and manipulation all woven into a narrative of betrayal and violence. Yet Victor's wealth and influence made him elusive, allowing him to stay one step ahead of the authorities. Reports surfaced of him being spotted in various cities, but each lead turned cold, leaving the search for him in a frustrating stalemate. Victor's connections within the business world afforded him a level of protection, allowing him to slip through the legal system's cracks. It seemed as if he might evade justice indefinitely. However, Lucy was determined not to let the case go cold. Her grief evolved into an unwavering drive for justice. She became an indispensable asset to the detectives, sharing every detail about Victor's controlling behavior, his threats, and his abusive tactics. She meticulously relayed how Tasha had been lured by luxury and wealth, only to be ensnared by fear and intimidation. Each detail she provided helped the detectives build a fuller picture of Victor, exposing the extent of his psychological manipulation. But Lucy knew that official investigations often get bogged down by red tape and bureaucracy. So she took matters into her own hands, hiring a private investigator to work alongside the police. She invested her savings and every available resource into the search for Victor. The investigator delved into Victor's background, examining his financial transactions, scrutinizing his business dealings, and speaking to people within his social circles. It soon became evident that Victor had meticulously planned his escape, leaving a trail that was difficult to follow. Despite numerous obstacles, Lucy's resolve never faltered. The media continued to follow the story, and Lucy became the face of the fight for justice. Her interviews were raw and emotional, not just recounting the case's facts, but also conveying the profound personal toll it had taken on her. She spoke candidly about her guilt, her grief, and her desperate need to see Victor held accountable for his actions. Public support surged, with people rallying behind Lucy and demanding answers. The pressure mounted on the police to intensify their search. As weeks turned into months, Lucy's frustration grew, but so did her network of allies. Women who had experienced similar situations with powerful, abusive men reached out to her, offering their support and sharing their stories. Together, they began to unravel the darker aspects of Victor's life, revealing a pattern of manipulation and control that extended far beyond Tasha. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became that Tasha was just one of many women Victor had targeted over the years. With each new revelation, the net around Victor tightened, bringing a glimmer of hope that justice might eventually be served. The police, armed with Lucy's information and the private investigators' findings, began closing in on Victor's hiding spots. Despite his wealth and influence enabling him to evade capture for a time, Victor's arrogance and belief in his own invincibility ultimately led to his downfall. After weeks of relentless searching, Victor was finally apprehended in a small town several states away, living under a false name. His attempt to flee justice had come to a decisive end, and he was swiftly taken into custody. The arrest made headlines, sparking a media frenzy that labeled the case the Sugar Daddy scandal. The public was riveted by the tale of a wealthy businessman whose twisted control over two teens culminated in a tragic and fatal confrontation. The media dissected every detail of the case, from Tasha's opulent lifestyle to the heart-wrenching conclusion that had devastated the Johnson family. As the trial approached, Lucy found herself at the epicenter of the storm. She had become the voice for her sister and a key witness to the events leading up to Tasha's death. The prosecution crafted their case around the narrative of manipulation and control, portraying Victor as a man who had used his wealth and power to dominate Tasha, ultimately pushing the situation to a fatal breaking point. Lucy, still grappling with her grief, took the stand with unwavering resolve. She recounted in painstaking detail the months of escalating tension, Victor's threats, and the fateful night that had changed everything. The courtroom was captivated as Lucy described how Victor had systematically isolated Tasha, making her dependent on him, and how his violence erupted when she tried to escape. She spoke candidly about her own failed attempts to protect her sister, the crushing guilt she carried, and the heart-wrenching moment she lost Tasha forever. The bond between the sisters, tragically severed by Victor's toxic control, was evident to everyone in the courtroom. Victor's defense team tried to frame Tasha's death as a tragic accident during a heated argument, but the overwhelming evidence of his abusive behavior and manipulative tactics told a different story. The trial, which lasted several weeks, saw both sides present their cases in full. However, the jury needed little time to deliberate. The weight of the testimony and the emotional impact of Lucy's account left no room for doubt. Victor was found guilty of manslaughter and sentenced to a lengthy prison term, bringing a measure of justice to the devastating case that had gripped the nation. Victor's days of wealth and power had crumbled under the weight of his crimes. Despite his conviction, Lucy found little solace in the verdict. Justice had been served, but it did nothing to bring back her sister. The pain of losing Tasha and the constant replaying of what could have been done differently haunted her. In the quiet moments after the trial, Lucy reflected on their relationship, the sisterly bond that had been strained but never fully broken, the tragic choices that had been made, and the devastating consequences of those decisions. She pondered the destructive allure of money and the power it gave people like Victor to control and manipulate, and how it had driven a wedge between her and Tasha in the final months of her sister's life. Lucy understood that no court ruling could change the past, but she was determined to ensure that Tasha's death wasn't in vain. She resolved to channel her grief into action. Lucy began speaking out about the dangers of predatory relationships, aiming to raise awareness and prevent others from falling into the same trap. She became an advocate, sharing her story with women in similar situations, warning them about the subtle ways control could infiltrate their lives under the guise of love and financial support. The tragedy had forever altered Lucy's life, but in her mission to help others, she found a new sense of purpose. Tasha's memory lived on, not as a victim of Victor's control, but as a poignant reminder of the perils that lie behind the promise of wealth and security. For Lucy, the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. To our dedicated viewers, thank you for your continued support and feedback. Your input helps us refine and improve our content, ensuring we bring you stories with the utmost respect for the truth and a focus on spreading human values. We deeply appreciate all of you who have been with us on this journey. Your support and affection mean the world to us. We look forward to sharing more stories and uncovering hidden aspects of life in our upcoming videos. Remember, knowledge and vigilance are powerful tools for protecting ourselves and our loved ones. Until next time, goodbye, and thank you for being a part of our community.